My name is Ethan Ross, and today I'm going to talk to you about nuclear energy and why we need to adopt it. My research question is, to what extent can nuclear energy be used to address the issue of climate change, specifically in the area of sustainability? Sustainability is super important in any debate about energy policy because the fossil fuels we're using right now to power the world economy is one, wasteful, and two, not as efficient as other energy sources such as nuclear energy. So, therefore, we need to adopt nuclear energy on a worldwide scale in order to combat the rising use of fossil fuels and lower global temperatures. First, let's look at some of the current problems that are facing our climate that necessitate a solution through nuclear energy. It is clear, according to my stimulus material, that dense population in urban centers is drastically increasing irrespective of any demographic studies performed by developing nations and international agencies. International agencies are not able to accurately predict the population growth and population concentration within urban centers in developing countries, thus disproportionately affecting developing countries in the sense that the international community does not have a stable grip on the consumption and energy needs of these cities. If these cities don't have the proper numbers reported to developed nations who can give them aid, then they won't receive the proper aid that they need. Additionally, we see that due to scientifically proven rising temperatures across the globe, the polar ice caps are melting, which is resulting in a sea level rise that will inevitably raise the sea levels by a few feet in the near future. Thus, we will be coastal cities and urban centers in developing nations will be in danger specifically because they don't have the energy infrastructure required to handle such a catastrophe, and they don't have the infrastructure needed to shift towards other forms of energy in the wake of fossil fuels causing global catastrophes. So we need to find a way for developing nations to adapt better to catastrophes. Additionally, and yeah, so okay, cool. All right, current attempts to solve. One, Margaret Thatcher gave a speech to the United Nations, and however long ago, I don't remember, in which she stated that the international community had a burden to work together towards solving the issue of climate change because it affected every single human being on the planet. Additionally, in 1997, the Kyoto Protocol was, or I don't know when it was, but the Kyoto Protocol essentially brought countries together and made them pledge to drastically reduce their carbon emissions in the next few years, in the next decade, and into the foreseeable future, so that global greenhouse gas emissions would decrease, and so too would temperature changes. However, it seems little has been done because the 2015 Paris Climate Accords, in which all developed and developing nations got together to propose objectives and goals for reducing total carbon dioxide emissions, nothing has been done. And in fact, the United States has pulled out of the agreement and no longer has any accountability in the international community to stop them from increasing carbon dioxide emissions, which means that the largest emitter of carbon dioxide is no longer bound by any international rules or regulations and can do whatever it wants at the expense of the environment and of people around the world, specifically in developing nations. Now, we've addressed our current problems facing the climate and that looks like in the international community. So now let's talk about why nuclear energy is specifically key. First and foremost, it's more efficient than fossil fuels and renewables. Some scientific studies said that it's 2.5 to 3.5 times more efficient than wind and solar energy farms, and 1.5 to 2 times more efficient than coal or natural gas powered power plants. Now, coal and natural gas are the leading causes of emissions within the United States and within developing nations. And while there has been a surge towards renewable energy, that's also not the most efficient thing we can do, because nuclear energy is clearly more efficient and more capable of meeting the energy needs of a growing population. Additionally, China, when looking at the United States' relative lack of experience and forward momentum on the issue of nuclear energy, is starting to produce nuclear energy technology at an astounding rate. It is making things such as small modular reactors and floating reactors, which don't necessarily have to be stored on land and don't have to cost as much, and marketing that technology to countries in areas such as Africa, where there's a growing portion of the world population is going to be in Africa in the decades to come, and thus the consumer demands and energy demands will increase, which requires more technology to be grown in the region. The United States is losing the race for energy hegemony to China if it does not establish a clear policy of supporting nuclear energy internationally. But there's a couple barriers to progress. The first one being that it cost nearly $3 billion in 2012 to construct a nuclear power plant in the United States. This requires companies paying fees and fines to regulatory and safety agencies so that their reactors can get inspected, that they can be cleared for construction, and that the government will allow them to use the land use the specific geographical area to construct a power plant. All of these things are unnecessary regulations that create a bureaucracy that hinders innovation and saps talent from our agencies, from our nuclear energy companies, which causes talent to go overseas and allow other countries to get a step ahead of the United States. Additionally, our government is currently practicing fossil fuel subsidization. Approximately $88 billion, as you can see in this graph, is given to fossil fuel companies for things like exploration, drilling, or the initiation of large projects that will yield a significant amount of energy for the United States, but will also hurt the environment and lead to things like oil spills and an increase in CO2 emissions. We can no longer fund fossil fuels and the degradation of the environment. We need to give nuclear energy companies the opportunity to enter the market competitively and beat out fossil fuel firms. So, what will an implementation of a nuclear energy friendly policy look like both in the United States and around the world? First and foremost, in the United States, we need deregulation and lowered safety thresholds so that nuclear power plants can be more readily available and readily built. Also, we need to decrease the government's involvement in the energy sector in general so that we no longer drive out nuclear energy corporations, but instead we foster cooperation and competition. And finally, there needs to be a corporate phase out of fossil fuels that is agreed upon by energy companies all around the world. It does not take that much money to shift energy innovation towards nuclear energy or renewables and away from fossil fuels. And large companies are already starting to do that, but they have not completely done so because the government is so friendly and the market is so friendly towards fossil fuels. In doing that, we can solve the issue of environmental degradation through the use of nuclear energy.